What's up, J Fusion fans, and welcome back to another video. And today we're going back into GARO versus Road. So I mentioned in the previous video that I would be making a character review of the major characters in the story, and what better way to start off than with our main protagonist, Sena Kuon. So from this point on, I will actually be referring to him as just Kuon because in the show, everybody calls each other by their last names. So I will just be calling him Kuon all throughout. And in order to talk about Kuon a bit more, I would also have to include his best friend, Shori Hoshiai, aka Hoshiai. So I'd be hitting two birds in one stone, actually. While Hoshiai does not appear in the show for very long, he remains relevant all throughout Garo vs. Road anyway. So, in order to talk about them in detail, I would basically be summarizing the whole show and, of course, major spoilers ahead. So, I highly recommend that you watch Garo versus Road first. If you haven't, come back to this video when you're ready. It's only just 12 episodes, so it's easy to binge in a day or less. So yeah, go ahead, watch it, or if you don't mind spoilers, well, enjoy. So Kuon is a very unique Garo compared to all of his other predecessors, both in live action and in anime, because Kuon by far is the only Garo that is born completely human. Now, what does this mean? So all the other Garos before have already been born and trained to become Makai Knights, let alone become the Golden Knight Garo. So for also a bit of Makai lore, all of those Garos, they either received their armor from their fathers, passed on from father to son, or from master to pupil. Now, the first case is the more common one. Let's say, for example, the Saijima clan from the original Garo series, where the original Garo that we know, Koga Saijima, received it from his father Taiga and then passes on to his son Raiga. And by the events of Moonbow Traveler, which is basically the conclusion to Raiga's story, he it is hinted that he will eventually have a son, and that son would become the next Garo. Now, the anime also shows us this with Leon Luis, Daiko, and Wilhelm Ranvald, aka Sword. So all of them were also born into the lineage of the Golden Knights. So the only other Garo that isn't clearly connected to the lineage is Ryuga Dogai from Yamio Terasumono and Goldstorm. So he so Ryuga only has his mother Wakana, and we have never heard of his father at all. So we can assume that Ryuga's father was a Makai knight who probably died in battle, but again, there was no mention of it at all. As per the story of Yamio Terasumono, uh, it is said that the Garo armor had lost its shine. It turned black and it turned mostly black centuries before Ryuga was even born. So uh, the last lineage that held Garo probably died out. So Yuga would probably fit into the second category where, he received it from a master, although technically Yuga was trained by a Makai priest, but nonetheless, Yuga had no clear connections to any knight that had held Garo before him. So the same would probably apply to uh, Kuon as well. In fact, again, spoilers for Garo versus Road. The previous Garo before Kuon was actually the father of Azami, the show's true antagonist. So, again, we now know that the Garo armor, especially in the Versus Road universe, doesn't have to be passed on from father to son or like through a certain bloodline. So Kuon starts off as a normal university student around the age of 20, more or less. So he spends a lot of time with his best friend Hoshiai. Now, comparing these two, Hoshiai is portrayed as some kind of nerd who likes video games and uh, is said to often skip school. So Kuon, being the straight laced one, would tell Hoshiai off and convince him to go back to school. And while it isn't shown at any point in the series, at least in the profile for Kuon in the official Garo versus Road website, it is said that he is actually a trained boxer. Now, whether uh, Kuon actually competes in like inter-school or inter-school competitions or anything like that, or whether he just trains in boxing as a form of exercise, nonetheless, Kuon is shown to be a capable fighter. So he actually already shows this in the first episode when he saves Hoshiai from a thug that's been harassing him. So surely Kuon takes a few hits himself, but nonetheless he defeats the thug rather easily. And when he is transported into the virtual world, which is actually the Makai world, as it was eventually revealed. So he and Hoshiai discovered that their abilities and their they become stronger basically. So their abilities are improved, and Hoshiai, who probably doesn't even know how to fight, actually was able to hold his own for a bit against the same thug that harassed him earlier. So of course, Kuon saves Hoshiai once again from that thug, and Kuon, in one punch, actually sends that thug flying, which he thought was impossible in a real life situation. But yeah, he discovers that he also has become stronger within the virtual world, aka Makai world. So of course, they would find out that in order to survive the game, you have to defeat other players or other participants in that battle royale, uh, and the winner gets the armor of Garo and basically whatever he wants. So of course, Kuon actually is a pacifist and, as much as possible, would try to avoid conflicts with other players and, in fact, would help them uh, as much as he can. So he basically progresses through the earlier stages of the battle royale without actually killing anyone. However, the main antagonist, Shosetsu Hagiri, aka Hagiri, took notice of this. So Hagiri notices that Kuon isn't releasing as much dark energy as he should. So the true antagonist of the show, Azami, tries to talk to him and whispers something to him that makes him uh, question his relationship with Hoshiai. So I believe this happens in episode 5. So trying to use her dark powers on him, like trying to convince him or something like that in order to, make him more aggressive. So a flashback is shown with their childhoods. So Kuon saves Hoshiai from a couple of bullies. While he does that, it is actually heavily implied that Hoshiai was actually the one who started the fight, and Kuon starts to question if he had done the right thing by saving Hoshiai, or uh, whether Hoshiai was actually just using him to beat up anyone he didn't like. So that flashback sowed some seeds of doubt into Kuon's heart, and by episode 6, so there's been a drastic change in his personality. The typically pacifist Kuon begins to act more aggressively. While he still hasn't killed anyone up to that point, he has nonetheless changed. And driven by despair due to Kuon's sudden change of heart, Hoshiai attracts the attention of one of the horrors that was stationed in the arena where they were fighting in. So the horror possesses Hoshiai, and in true Garo fashion, anyone who is possessed by a horror will never return to normal. So knowing this, Hoshiai asks Kuon for one last favor and asks Kuon to kill him. So Kuon hesitates, and with no other option left to choose, Hoshiai activates the self destruct button located on the back of his neck. So at that point, every participant that survived, so they all had these special colors with that said button. So basically, when you press that button, the timer starts, and eventually the bomb in that color deactivates, killing the player instantly. So of course it kills Hoshiai, and at that point, so a key item is left. So Hoshiai leaves a sword-shaped pendant. Now this pendant also triggers a flashback. So it is shown that when they were children, Kuon and Hoshiai played a crane game, and that's where they got those pendants. Now, going back a bit to episode 3, I believe, the players receive a special item which appears to be a crystal like cylinder that can turn into any item that the player wishes. So, uh, most of the players turn it into weapons, and Kuon turns his crystal into a sword, which is inspired by that very pendant that they got since they were children. So, uh, Kuon has a pendant with a red gem in it, so it basically becomes his weapon, and Hoshiai's version has a blue gem. Now, only in episode 6 does Hoshiai use a personal weapon, which again is based on his version of the pendant. So Kuon and Hoshiai basically had the same sword, just a different colored pendant. So when Hoshiai died, so Kuon took Hoshiai's pendant, and from that point on, his personal weapon was basically Hoshiai's. So he basically took Hoshiai's weapon with him as a homage to his best friend. And by episode 8 or 9, I believe, there was another item introduced called the Demon Sword. And anyone who had the Demon Sword must kill all the other players, or probably kill as many players as you can within a time limit of 99.9 seconds. Now, in traditional Garo, especially the Saijima universe, uh, a Makai armor can only be worn within 99.9 seconds. Otherwise, if you exceed that time limit, the armor will basically devour you and you turn into a monster. So, they applied that same mechanic here, albeit with the demon sword. So, Shuka, the navigator, by the way, she says that anyone who fails to kill another player using the demon sword within the time limit becomes an undead. So you basically turn into a zombie, but not a horror. She clarifies this. Uh, so you basically just turn into a mindless zombie. But when Kuon takes a hold of the demon sword, he manages to kill one of the players that had actually turned zombie. And at that point, the pendant that Hoshiai left behind, so he was wearing it on his wrist then. So Kuon, or Hoshiai's pendant rather, begins glowing in a golden light, already hinting that Kuon is meant to become the next Garo. So Kuon, of course, eventually moves on to the finals of that battle royale, and we are eventually left with two players. So the other remaining player is Ryosuke Amo, aka Amo. Uh, so at that point, Kuon decides not to kill Amo. So Shuka appears and clarifies that one of them has to die in order to actually end that battle royale. But Shuka suddenly starts acting strange and starts to speak about the truth behind the Garo armor and how it chooses its wearer. But before Shuka can actually reveal any useful information, Hagiri shows up and destroys her. So uh, he saw that Shuka was acting out of line, and that's why he decides to destroy her before she can actually reveal the truth to them. Now, having been angered by this, of course, uh, Kuon decides to challenge Hagiri in combat, but Hagiri, being a more trained and experienced Makai knight, so he definitely has the advantage over Kuon. And while this is happening, of course, an injured Amo tries to stop Hagiri from killing Kuon, but Hagiri decides to make an example by killing off Amo. So what happens is that it triggers the dark energy that has accumulated in Kuon to be released, and it eventually creates, or it eventually completes the dark armor called Veil. Uh, so we see here that the battle royale was actually just the Hagiri's plot to collect dark energy from all the other players, transfer them into the Garo armor, and basically create a copy of the armor. Well, not really a copy of Garo armor, but an armor that is based off of Garo, but made with a completely different material called the dark metal, which is a dark version of the soul metal, which was the material used to make Garo armor. So the dark metal is made from the dark energies of people fused with the soul metal, and for like over 20 years uh Hagiri has tried to collect all this dark energy in order to create the veil armor. So again, Kuon's anger is released, and that dark energy ironically completes the veil armor. So the Garo armor shatters in front of Kuon, and Hagiri still tries to convince Kuon to join him. Uh, by episode 8 or 9, I believe, so Hagiri actually shows up to Kuon and tries to convince him to join him. So Hagiri explains that he sees his younger self in Kuon. Now, Kuon doesn't buy into this, but in Hagiri's own flashback, they are actually similar in personality. Like, Hagiri was basically a model Makai Knight trainee. He seemingly has all the qualities to become a perfect Makai Knight even, but by the final round of their battle royale, he gives in to his desire to obtain the Garo armor just and his own anger, which warps his own core values, like his sense of justice basically gone at that point, and it releases the dark energy within Hagiri, which basically creates the seed for the dark metal that would eventually create the veil armor. So Hagiri uses the veil armor and tries to test it on Sena or Kuon, but uh, out of nowhere, despite having been shattered, or at least the armor was shattered, the Garoken suddenly appears out of the sky, falling into a rock, and the sentient voice inside the Garoken tells Senna to pull it. So uh, Senna tries to pull the sword. So again, the pendant left by Hoshiai begins to glow in a golden light, and Kuon eventually pulls out the sword and becomes the new Garo. So he does fight the Hagiri wearing the veil armor. So at some point, the Kuon is overpowered, but the Garo armor suddenly shows him flashbacks or of the other uh, major characters in the show, including Hoshiai. So with all the memories that flow into Kuon's mind, all the memories from the other players, uh, he actually learns their unique techniques and uses them on Hagiri. And of course, he eventually defeats Hagiri and the Veil armor. So, Hagiri, having been lost, is deemed useless by Azami and kills him off. Now, what is strange is that Azami actually lets Kuon live. So she tells him that they will meet again. Uh, at that point, seeing ice, we can see that Kuon is clearly injured himself, and Azami could have killed him off easily. But who knows? Maybe she has some sort of other plans. But uh, after that, she just leaves, and Kuon, after that battle with Hagiri, he just leaves the Garoken where it stood and walks away from it. And that's basically where our story ends. Now, like I've mentioned before, probably when I reviewed the final episode of Garo versus Road, I really wanted to see more of Kuon. So we're basically left with a cliffhanger. But if ever Garo versus Road would have a sequel or have another show in its own continuity, there may still be a possibility that Kuon might return. Uh, what I see, however, is that he would probably be reluctant to become Garo once again. Uh, Probably, remembering all the deaths that have happened, all the people that were lost uh, just for the sake of the Garo armor. So he probably wouldn't want that again. But again, the true threat, Azami, is still out there. Remember that. So again, at some point, there needs to be someone who should take up the Garo armor. So whether it's Kuon once again, or we would find a new Golden Knight, and Kuon would probably take on a mentor role, I guess. That's also a possibility that I'm thinking of. But either way, I would like to see a continuation of the Versus Road story. Um, Going back into Kuon and Hagiri, so I did mention earlier that Hagiri claims to see his younger self in Kuon. Like I've said, when we saw uh, Hagiri's own flashback, they are actually very similar in that, they wanted to fight for justice, they wanted to protect people, but the difference is when the crucial moment came, Kuon actually rejected the armor, and in fact, he denies the armor. So when he actually goes so far as to saying that there is no Garo, even though he had seen the armor shattered in front of him. Well, probably that's why he said that there's no more Garo. So uh, I guess his lack of desire, probably for any sort of power, actually makes him worthy of that power, if that makes sense. So uh, apparently, all the dark energies that come from the other players, even from Hagiri himself when he was younger. So it all came from a desire to obtain the power of Garo. So, uh, well, probably the other, again, most likely the other players who Kuon fought against, they had their own personal desires, but uh, I guess even Hoshiai, when he was shown, it seems that he wanted to be a professional gamer. He probably would have wanted, success as a professional esports gamer, but apparently, again, the versus road was all just a ruse created by Hagiri to create the Veil armor. So their core values became different. Now, Hagiri explains that when he created the Veil armor, he wanted to create a perfect world, while Kuon actually accepts that this world isn't perfect. So, Hagiri wanted to get rid of all the conflicts, but basically put the world under his control just for the sake of peace. But Kuon doesn't want that. Again, like I've said, he probably knew that this world couldn't be saved by any means at all. People would just continue living on as they were. So, probably by accepting that fact that the world isn't going to change no matter how hard you try, the Garo can probably chose him for that. So by accepting that the world cannot actually be changed at all, or if we want to change the world, we can only change ourselves. No, if you want to change the world, change yourself. Probably that is uh, the moral of the story for Versus Road. That's just my guess, but yeah, uh, that's probably what makes Kuon worthy of the armor. So yeah, like I've said, at that point their core values have differed. So basically, that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I have spent quite a lot of time trying to, put my thoughts together in order to create this video. So I do hope you enjoyed this one. Please do leave a like, comment, subscribe, share this video with your friends, and hit that notification bell so you get the latest from JE Fusion. This has been Philip, and I'll see you in another Gato vs. Road character review very soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.